Pierre, how are you?
Doc, I need your help, man. This Nintendo 64 thing is starting to really get out of control.
Yeah, I'm actually watching your video right now, and it's kind of concerning.
Everywhere I go to try and play a game, man, it's just there.
I see.
I, I can't sleep without having a dream about it. I can't play a different console. It's just been in my head this entire time, man. I don't know what to do.
Well, truthfully, usually in this field, the best way to handle it is just to get it all out your system.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Yeah, get it out my system. Thanks for your help. Get it out my system.
Now this video will be somewhat of a follow-up to my last one on the aspects of Nintendo 64 Online, as in that video I discussed the outlook and reasoning behind the N64 making its way to the Switch's online service this year, bunched in with the then looming deadline that resulted in the execution of Mario. But now that that day is past, I want to take this video to further flesh out the concept as a whole, as well as lay out a structure of what we could expect if Nintendo decides to add 64 titles on the online library. Now, when the company introduced the previous two systems, not many were available on day one. In fact, both the NES and SNES debuts on the Switch, only 20 games each were present from the start. So as I continue my celebration for 25 years from the iconic console, without further ado, here is the 20 games I think we should get on launch for Nintendo 64 Online. Going down my original list, I structured it based on what would be the most realistic library in reference to that of how the SNES library looks currently. Granted, there are many exclusions due to licensing, and a lot more obscure games have been added in place. And while I've definitely taken licensing into account, seeing games like Donkey Kong Country Trilogy make the roster eventually gave me hope to reach for a new few classic third-party titles. That being said, however, the first game that must be on the Switch Online's Nintendo 64 library is without a doubt Super Mario 64. The best-selling title for the N64 and the game synonymous with the console itself. Super Mario 64 was the icon's introduction within the third dimension, and in turn became a frontrunner that represented the gaming industry's directions and ambitions of 3D graphics going into the 21st century. Right alongside it, I have Mario Kart 64. After the success of Super Mario Kart, Kart 64 is where the series truly transcended into the multiplayer staple it is recognized as today. And that sentiment holds strong as it trails only Mario 64 in all-time sales. To continue on the Mario theme, Paper Mario should also be a no-brainer in my opinion. One of the later titles of the N64's lifespan, it would be an important addition being the introduction to the Paper Mario series. The RPG is arguably one of the best of its genre, and as I've revisited it in recent times, the game holds up well, partially thanks to its unique art style. Another Mario slugger for the N64 that must be represented is the Mario Party series, joining Paper Mario as a sub-series in the Plumbers universe that started off on the 64-bit console. For the selection, however, I've chosen Mario Party 2 over both Mario Party 3 and the original game. The reason behind that decision was that the party games would already be limited depending on if Switch Online would have an expanded online mode for the titles. Also, with it being 3 installments on the console, I wanted to minimize the amount of space taken up by sequels. Mario Party 2 remains the most favored of the 3 by the majority, and I feel it best represents the positives of the series in its early stages. For even more spin-offs, I think the very first Mario Tennis and Mario Golf titles should be available as well. Being the first installment in one of the most consistent spin-offs for the franchise, Mario Tennis is definitely a historical inclusion on this list, not only because it is the first, but because it also gifted the world with Waluigi. As for golf, it is known at this point that the series is returning this summer with Mario Golf Star Rush, And what's better promotion than including the original title to give Switch Online members a special demo for what the series has to offer? For the next few games, let's move on from Mario and address the other series that are an absolute must for this list. You know, I feel like it's the law that you have to include the intro every time you discuss this game in a video. It's just that powerful. And that alone really speaks to how impactful, influential, and flat out iconic The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is. Quite literally one of the most acclaimed and conversed pieces of gaming in the history of the medium, being the highest rated video game on many of the prominent critique and review platforms on the internet. From the soundtrack, to the storytelling and writing, to the way it reinvented an already blue ribbon series, Ocarina of Time is a work of art that should always be available for a new generation of gamers to experience. And on the other side of that coin lies the polarizing follow-up Majora's Mask, another title that claims a spot on my list. Majora's Mask takes the basis of Ocarina's fantastic gameplay and envelops it in a mind-boggling and unsettling story that makes it a well-respected classic in itself, separate from the title its engine originated from. Flipping from there, another series that grabbed a hold on the industry at the time was Pokémon. And while the series' best showings during the turn of the century took place on the Game Boy, the N64 also had some picks worth adding. Pokémon Stadium allowed fans to see the Pocket Monsters in 3D for the first time, as well as bringing the iconic turn-based strategy gameplay of the franchise to home console. And since Pokémon Snap is returning at the end of April with new Pokémon Snap, throwing the original game in the mix may intrigue players who are on the fence of the game's concept, perhaps in turn helping push sales for the new installment. Going down the line, all of Nintendo's larger IPs need proper representation amongst this roster, and I'm sure for most that the first that comes to mind once you get past the big three of Mario, Zelda, and Pokémon is Kirby. Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards is the title that fills in for the Pink Puff's 64-bit appearance. The 2000 title isn't anything spectacular compared to most other big-name games of the system. However, in classic Kirby fashion, it is easy, enjoyable, and full of color. F-Zero X comes in here as well, as although it has gone dormant in recent years, F-Zero is another IP I view as vital to Nintendo's core lineup from the late 90s, and boy is F-Zero X a game. While some may say it can lack in the detail department, it was one of the most high adrenaline games to hit the console, impressing critics with his blazing speed as well as his awfully smooth frame rate for a racing game at the time. Star Fox 64 is an N64 mainstay as well, and perhaps the best output we've ever seen from the Star Fox series. The 3D rail shooter transitioned to Nintendo's first 3D console perfectly. The new voice acting and branching system of pathways helped the series expand the limits of its story, as well as retaining some of the best replay value of any game I've mentioned so far. Yoshi's Story continued Yoshi's World branching off from that of Mario's following Super Mario World 2, and similar to Kirby, its gameplay was easy and bright. Its soundtrack is bubbly and its art style is eye-popping at times. But most importantly in this representation within the list, Yoshi's Story shows the true origin of the creative formula that has since developed an identity for Yoshi's platformers since. But it wouldn't be right for me to highlight valuable Nintendo properties without addressing one that has arguably been the company's most impactful as the years go on, and that series would be none other than This one was an easy pick for me, yet for some reason I can't really see it coming to a hypothetical 64 online lineup. While it was on the Wii Virtual Console, the game feels so grandiose, so elite, it feels to even bring it along to a preloaded service like Switch Online is a low possibility. However, it is always important for young gamers to see where a Hall of Fame series got its start, and if it didn't make the cut on this list, it just wouldn't have been justified. The 5th best-selling game on the system, Smash Bros. Forever leveled the playing field for fighting games, changing the genre with its new style and kicking off the greatest and most hostile 20-year video game crossover of all time. Next, let's look into some of the reaches I have in terms of third-party classics. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, it was a big deal seeing the Donkey Kong Country trilogy eventually arrive to the SNES Online library. Amongst other inclusions, it showed that rare gems and other third-party games had a chance of coming through to the Switch. That being said, it has taken a long time for these games to be added, so having third-party titles on this list would be quite a stretch, especially considering the fact that this is based on a hypothetical of what would be available at launch. Nevertheless, one of the first I picked was Donkey Kong 64. While all of the other Nintendo icons would be represented in this collection, there is a Microsoft-shaped wall that distances DK from the rest. But what lies past that point is the 1999 rare classic Donkey Kong 64. Despite its frequent criticism for being a collectathon, it represents the Donkey Kong Country series entrance into 3D, as well as being a title that has pushed the console to its limits. To couple with that, I think an underrated necessity for this group would be Rare's racing game Diddy Kong Racing. If you weren't playing Mario Kart 64, you were playing Diddy Kong Racing. The title was just as charming with pleasing graphics for the time, and looking back on the game's reviews, it might even be better than Mario Kart 64 depending on who you ask. The last rare classic to make a clean 3 games would have to be Banjo-Kazooie. Asking for Donkey Kong is one thing, since the character is a Nintendo property. However, Banjo and Kazooie are a separate case. That being said, Banjo-Kazooie is such an iconic and valuable title to the 64's library that it would be a complete injustice to have it left off of this list. The game's glorious soundtrack, detailed environments, and focus on exploration is responsible for many of the leaps open platformers and collectathons would take in the generations following. And with the relationship between Microsoft and Nintendo seemingly in good spirits based on the inclusions of Banjo and Steve in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, among other aspects, it is 100% in the realm of possibility that Banjo-Kazooie can make the cut. Finally, to round out this list for an even 20, I have Wave Race 64 and Pilot Wings 64. Pilot Wings was honestly a game that I planned to have in my honorable mentions. However, the fact that it was a launch title along with Mario 64, I have a feeling it would be a given and an easy addition for the Switch library. The original Pilot Wings is available already as well, so it would be another case of natural progression with the series that can be accessed on the service. The game itself is your average Pilot Wings experience, a smooth and simple flight simulator that gets some added depth from the 64's hardware, both figuratively and literally. Wave Race 64 is the jet ski racing gem developed by Miyamoto himself that was often referred to as F-Zero on water. One of the most fun racing games I've played to date, Wave Race 64 has dynamic water physics for the time and a pretty solid multiplayer mode that makes up for the lack in soundtrack depth and overall content. Despite that, it was a commercial success, and that still sits on the top 15 best-selling games of the Nintendo 64. So, those were my 20 picks for a Nintendo 64 library that should be available on the Switch's online service. That being said, it was difficult to cut it to just 20, so I do have a few honorable mentions that have to be acknowledged. Even the honorables that didn't make the list were hard to pick, so I only have a limited number of titles in my formal honorable mentions, and the first one is obviously the most glaring exclusion, GoldenEye 007. Being the third best-selling Nintendo 64 title ever, it is near disrespectful to not bring it up when forming a curated list of 64 titles. But the 1997 first-person shooter has a lot of licensing baggage that prevents it from being included. 007 was already a third-party title, another rare masterpiece. But on top of that comes the licensing of the James Bond character, as it was based on the 1995 film GoldenEye. The multiplayer mode of 007 has become recognized as one of the most iconic gameplay experiences of the time. 1080 snowboarding almost knocked out Pilot Wing 64 for the last spot on this list, as the game was much more of a commercial success in comparison. I also thought about some sequels like Mario Party 3, Pokémon Stadium 2, and even Banjo-Tooie, but refrained due to wanting to keep the list from getting too bloated. Excitebike's 2000 sequel Excitebike 64 also holds a strong case, as the series is a notable one amongst Nintendo's older franchises. And GoldenEye's spiritual successor, Perfect Dark, yet another exemplary Rare title, received enough critical acclaim for its graphics, artificial intelligence, and multiplayer options to be viewed as unparalleled to its competition, making it another difficult choice to leave off the list. All in all, despite the drawbacks that come with Switch Online and the limits on the NES and SNES's libraries, I'm still clearly very excited to see that next step being taken that will bring Nintendo 64 games to the platform. The console celebrates its 25th birthday in September, and hopefully its arrival to the Switch will be its great birthday gift. Fingers crossed that many of the games I discussed will make the cut if that day actually comes. But that's just my personal wish list. What are some games that you would love to see on a hypothetical Nintendo 64 Online lineup? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out some other videos on the channel. Definitely got more to come soon. And if you got to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
We're heading out. All aircraft report.
I mean, it's really weird.